else to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
Today I gotta call out a biter, man. I gotta do it, but we're gonna keep it nice, respectful, and remember, we're only here to help. That's it. And the reason I want to shed light on this is because I see a lot of new and even experienced and even some professional graffiti artists do exactly this thing where they copy other people's work. And I feel like if we can kind of show a different way to learn, if we can, offer up some good information, then we might be able to help out a bunch of people. And that's always good. That's always a good day. So let's hop right into it as I rate your guys' work on a scale from 1 to 10. And all the work in today's video has been submitted through Instagram. Now this one right here is pretty interesting because we know this person doesn't have all that much experience in graffiti. They themselves say it. But we do see them trying out fundamentals. We see them actively trying to understand the basic boxes and how they work. So let me give you a little bit of advice here. You see the way that you're kind of forcing this basic box to connect up there at the vertex? The issue with this is that's not the way the basic box actually aligns. So the reason we have basic boxes for pieces is because it simulates how lines connect when using a normal writing utensil. Now it's easier to see this on chisel tips because you do have one edge and a second edge which creates that vertex and the vertices that connect, to one another. But it also happens with pens, pencils, so on and so forth. It's just harder to detect because you have a single point that's happening to. And you can try this at home, but when you go ahead and you draw a line and you connect it to another line, say for the letter R, you'll notice that this basic bowl, the rounded portion of the R, connects at the top left of the stem, and this line will just project on right over here. This bottom one doesn't need to connect at a vertex because the top one is already doing that. So there's no need to force it up here. And that simple misunderstanding of how basic boxes function is going to kind of cascade into other issues as we're seeing with the A, where you're beginning to lean the structure of the A in order to feed into that vertex connecting into one another. Now that struggle of working with more rounded boxes directly correlates to the issue you're having with the S. Just focus on nice, smooth lines and shapes for the letter S. Work on that consistency. You see how nice and round this part of the R is? You want that for your letter S 2 times. You want it on the bottom and you want it on the back on the top portion. If you can achieve that, you can do the letter S just fine. It's not any more difficult than just writing it in basic print font. But I like the fact that they're actively trying to understand those fundamentals. 3 out of 10 I think is fair for that. Here's my submission, they say. Not bad work. I like it. Some digital stuff that we don't see too often here on the channel, but they didn't do a bad job. Now each letter is kind of segmented into its own individual space and letter. It doesn't really come together as one cohesive image, unfortunately. That would be my one gripe and critique about this, other than the weight, which is a different issue entirely. But the letters themselves are not bad. So at least that's a plus. With that said, I do feel weird going ahead and commenting on how unified these letters are because I've seen work from them in the past and I know they're more than capable of landing that, right? Of making the letters flow as one cohesive image. I just don't think they hit the nail on the head this time. Also, I do like how the eye is kind of cut out from the bricks in the background, but we don't really get to see that. That's not well established at all whatsoever. There's also not a large amount of contrast in this image, unfortunately, so there's a couple of things here that aren't quite lining up in order for me to give this a necessarily 10 out of 10. So for that, I'd give this a good 6 or 7 out of 10. We are going to give this a 2 out of 10. This is not a throw up that's very practical at all whatsoever, and the hand style just screams that they don't really have a lot of experience. And without scrolling up, I bet you if we scroll up, we're going to see evidence that they don't have all that much experience, which if that's true, if I scroll up and we see that they don't have a lot of experience, it means that this throw up was heavily inspired by other graffiti artists. Because once again, the way that this M functions is not something an amateur comes up with on their own. This is something that is observed, it's something that is learned. On that note, I do gotta compliment their line control and their actual shape control. Those 2 elements of art, they did beautifully well, and they actually excel at those 2, parts. And I think that's gonna help them out a bunch in the future as they progress. As they progress and as they begin to learn more about letter structure, so on and so forth, their use of lines and shapes is going to allow them to bring that to life and really illustrate their knowledge beautifully. So let's go ahead and scroll up and see their skill and knowledge, and here we go. We begin seeing that they are pretty new to graffiti and they don't have all that much experience. This was just in October 2022. Oh, in fact, I gave them a critique in the past. What did I say? Did I say keep it simple, practice the basics? Let's listen.
Hey buddy, what's up, man? So I went ahead and checked out your profile, checked out some of your work, and you're going to want to keep it simple, practice the basics.
There you go. Keep it simple, practice the basics. The advice they still haven't listened to. and it's the one thing holding them back. At first glance, it would appear that the person we just critiqued has better graffiti than this guy, but I guarantee you, this guy's going to see a lot more improvement a lot faster because they're working with much more simplified forms, and they're not working under the illusion that they already have an understanding for these basic fundamentals. Look at the perfect negative space management within each of these individual letters. The really decent height with the letters as well. Everything ways just about the same. Now there is a slight downward angle to the letters, but that's hardly something to even like harp on. It's still really well done. Yeah, sure, we can see that their control over shapes isn't exactly the cleanest, and potentially that their lines aren't also the cleanest, but with some practice in lines and shapes, they'll be off to the races. My friend, way too much style. You gotta keep it simple, practice the basics, and I would recommend stop copying people. One of the biggest dead giveaways that somebody is copying is if you see a harsh cutoff on some of their work. Now this is not always the case, especially in graffiti where sometimes people are practicing for a specific spot that they know has a cutoff, right? But in instances like this, we could tell that he does not have the skill in order to come up with any of this, none of it. Look at the lack of line control for this hand style, the lack of letter structure control, the structure dependent details like the H going into the E. These are all very amateur motifs and red flags that let us see the real skill level and knowledge level behind this graffiti artist. So when we see advanced letter structures like this right here, this is not something that an amateur comes up with. This is something that they observe and then they do from the observation. We can also see more kind of non-practical details being added to the throwy, which once again is something that an amateur is much more likely to do. So we know that they copied pretty much everything here. None of this is their actual own skill level, which is why I'm gonna say keep it simple, practice the basics. Basic print font, hand styles, and straight letters, practice your elements of art. You're still early in your graffiti career, so I feel like right now is the best time to call you out for copying and biting, because it'll stop this from happening later on in your graffiti career, and it'll give you the knowledge and structure and foundation that you need in order to build off of now, that way you're better a couple years from now. Yo, holy crap! I'll be honest, this piece on the right is really nice. One of my favorite things back in the day was like to go to walls and see people do holiday themed walls. Now I don't see Happy Halloween anywhere, but you know, the pumpkin, the bats, so on and so forth, makes it look like a Halloween themed wall, and I love it. There's a kind of like charm to these holiday themed walls that were not done legally. I don't know what it is. I don't know what that charm is, man, because I don't get the same charm from holiday themed murals, you know? And maybe some of you guys can relate to that. I'll give this piece on the right a good 8 out of 10, maybe a 9 out of 10. I really love this S. It looks beautiful, and the uniformity that they have with the C as well is gorgeously done. They even carry that over to the O by swinging the basic box up, around, and over to the swoosh that reflects the same C and S top as well. They carry this throughout with an R, which I do believe the R could have been maybe a little bit bulkier on the top in order to help balance out the left-hand side, but the E more than compensates for that weight on the right-hand side. I mean, I say more than compensates, but it could use a little bit more weight on the right-hand side, but given the fact that this is on a wall and also in a questionable spot, you gotta give some leeway, right? When things are done on walls, you gotta give leeway. So not bad at all. Not bad at all. Now there's two problems here I would like to go ahead and touch on. They are pretty small though, so not the biggest things at all. The hand style. First things first, when you see a spot that you want to go ahead and put your tag or your throwy on, make sure you have enough room to do the thing you want to do. And a big part of this is make sure you're using the right cap for the spot. You can't believe how many people I've seen, and maybe you guys can relate. I've seen so many new graffiti artists use like an Astro fat cap on a stop sign for a tag, and I'm looking at it like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why would you do that? Now that's not exactly what's happening here. Now though it does look like they started to run out of room here on the right hand side, it looks like they did a generally good job for it, but had they done the tag smaller, you know, your tag doesn't really need to be that big. That's what the piece is there for. So when you have something this large and that kind of sloppy looking over on the side of it, it kind of degrades the overall wall as a whole. Doing it smaller would kind of minimize that. Alright, those are some pretty good critiques. You guys had some beautiful work. And although I wasn't able to get to everybody, do know I record like 5 of these back to back to back, so if you didn't see yours in this week, you might see it in the next episode. Regardless, if you want to make the learning process of graffiti painless and a lot easier, pick up one of the books I published in the description down below, or check out the best how to do graffiti playlist right up here. We even have more graffiti content right down here. But as always, I want to thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you back here next week.